It's a warm Friday afternoon, July 19th, 2024, just after 4:30 p.m., in a quiet apartment complex in North Harris County, Texas. The sound of running footsteps breaks the stillness. A young woman, terrified, out of breath, sprints across the parking lot. Neighbors glance out their windows, some frozen in shock, others too afraid to move. She's yelling for help. You can hear the panic in her voice. And then, brief silence. The sharp crack of gunfire cuts through the air. Multiple shots. People duck for cover. Somewhere in the chaos, someone dials 911. In just moments, a mother's life will be stolen, and the world will learn her name. Mercina Struggs. Welcome to ARAD True Crime Vault. This is where we uncover and retell real stories of crime, loss, and the fight for justice. Stories that deserve to be heard and remembered. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe these real stories must be told, subscribe to ARAD True Crime Vault now and join a growing community that refuses to let these voices fade. Before that terrible afternoon, Mercina Struggs was known not as a headline, but as a daughter, a sister, and most importantly, a mother. She was only 29, with a smile that friends say could light up a room, and a laugh her family called contagious. Born and raised in Louisiana, Mercina dreamed of giving her 8-year-old son the kind of stability every child deserves. That's why, in early 2024, she packed up everything she owned and moved to Houston, Texas. She wanted safer schools, better opportunities, and a fresh start for the two of them. Life in Houston wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. Mercina worked hard, balancing long hours and parenting, making sure her boy felt loved and supported. Family photos show a young mom kneeling beside her son on his first day of school, birthday candles glowing in front of them, laughter frozen in time. Her sister described her as the rock of their family, always the one people turned to for comfort and advice. She had a way of making everyone around her feel seen and loved. But behind closed doors, her personal life was more complicated. She had been involved with Nicholas Finley, a man her family says had moments of charm, but also brought tension and unease into her world. Over time, that relationship began to fray. She started spending more time with her son, leaning on her sister for strength. And although she never stopped smiling in public, those closest to her sensed that something was weighing on her heart. Friends noticed how protective she became when Finley was mentioned, how quickly she'd changed the subject. She was trying to hold everything together, to keep life normal for her child, even as the foundation beneath her began to crack. As summer reached its peak that July, Mercina was doing her best to focus on moving forward, building a life free from turmoil. She had goals, plans for school, and dreams of eventually buying a home where her boy could have a backyard to run in. But just weeks after settling into her new apartment, the world she worked so hard to create would shatter. Those closest to Mercina knew she had been trying to distance herself from Nicholas Finley. Family would later call him an ex-boyfriend, a man she was working hard to leave behind. Friends said she no longer spoke about a future with him the way she once did. What had started as a relationship filled with promises slowly turned into one weighed down by control and conflict. Neighbors recall moments when raised voices carried through thin apartment walls. Mercina, usually calm in private, appeared guarded in public, careful about who saw her with Finley. Even her own sister noticed a shift in how often they spoke, and how quickly Mercina would change the topic whenever his name came up. It wasn't just arguments. It was a feeling of being watched, of having her movements questioned, of being made to feel small. Mercina wanted freedom from that. She wanted to protect her son from witnessing a life where fear dictated choices. She'd started making quiet plans, leaning on family for support, trying to carve out a way forward. But leaving someone who refuses to let go is never simple. Tension built slowly, mostly out of sight. Then came mid-July, a summer Friday when the pressure reached its breaking point. What began as a normal day for Mercina, dropping her son off, running errands, thinking about dinner, would soon turn into something no one could have imagined. Just hours later, that same apartment complex where she had hoped to rebuild her life would become the backdrop to the unthinkable. Friday, July 19th, 2024, began like any other summer day in North Harris County. The sun hung heavy over Houston, and by mid-afternoon, residents at the park at Cumberland Apartments were heading home from work or watching kids ride bikes in the courtyard. Around 4 p.m., Nicholas Finley was stopped by police during a routine traffic stop while driving Mercina's car. Officers asked for proof of insurance, and Finley didn't have the card. What should have been a minor inconvenience set off a chain of calls and messages to Mercina, urging her to bring the document he needed. She didn't know it yet, but by agreeing to meet him that day, she was walking straight into danger. At 4:25 p.m., witnesses say she pulled into the complex's lot, stepping out her vehicle with paperwork in hand. Finley was already waiting. Tension hung in the hot Texas air as the two exchanged words near the parked car. A neighbor glanced from a balcony, sensing something wasn't right, but not knowing how bad it would get. This wasn't just a quick stop to help out. It was the first step in a violent chain of events that would change lives forever. You're watching AirAd True Crime Vault. If you're moved by real stories like this one, remember to subscribe now and join a community that keeps these stories alive. What started as a simple favor became the beginning of a nightmare. The moment Mercina handed over the insurance card, what should have been a brief exchange shifted. Witnesses remember seeing Nicholas Finley's demeanor change. His voice grew louder, his stance aggressive. A neighbor stepping out to check their mailbox caught the sound of heated words, the sharp tone of an argument. Seconds later, a shot rang out. People froze. Mercina screamed and stumbled back before turning to run, clutching her side. Panicked footsteps slapped against the pavement as she sprinted to the lot, her only thought to find safety and get away. Finley didn't stop. He raised the gun and fired again. Shell casings bounced across the asphalt as residents ducked behind cars, shouting warnings to each other. One neighbor on a balcony yelled for someone to call 911, while another rushed to their door, terrified the gunfire would reach them. As Mercina ran past parked vehicles, desperate to reach anyone who could help, Finley kept chasing. Witnesses said his voice carried through the complex, filled with rage, swearing at anyone who tried to step in. Neighbors later told deputies they could hear him threatening to kill anyone who helped her. This wasn't a single moment of anger. It was a relentless pursuit, each step narrowing the distance between them. By now, the entire complex was aware something horrific was unfolding. Children were rushed inside, blinds snapped shut, yet I stayed glued to cracks in windows as they prayed she'd somehow get away. As Mercina rounded the corner of the lot, she spotted a pickup truck parked near the entrance. A man was inside, engine idling. She threw herself against the door, pounding with frantic fists, screaming for help. The driver reached over, fumbling for the handle to unlock it. Before she could climb inside, more shots rang out. Bullets tore into the truck side panel. The driver ducked low, yelling for her to get down. Finley's voice carried through the chaos, shouting that anyone who tried to save her would die too, with nowhere safe to hide. Mercina stumbled away from the truck and made a final desperate run toward another vehicle parked further down. Her hands shook as she tried to open the door, but before she could, another round of shots cracked through the hot July air. Neighbors who saw it said she collapsed to the ground, crying out in pain. Yet even as she lay there, struggling to breathe, Finley didn't stop. Witnesses say he walked up slowly, towering over her, his shadow stretching across the pavement. And then, without a word, more shots. Dozens of them, until the sound of the gun finally clicked empty. Silence spread to the complex, broken only by faint sobs and the distant wail of sirens growing closer. Even as she collapsed, the horror wasn't over. By the time deputies in the Harris County Sheriff's Office arrived at 4:40 p.m., the sound of gunfire had stopped. They moved quickly through the apartment complex, weapons drawn, scanning for the shooter. What they found was devastating. Mercina Struggs lying motionless on the pavement, surrounded by shell casings scattered across the parking lot. Neighbors stood frozen behind doors and windows, some clutching children, others holding phones still connected to 911 dispatchers. First responders checked for signs of life, but it was too late. Mercina had been shot multiple times and died at the scene. Finley had fled moments earlier in her own vehicle, speeding away with her purse still inside. Officers issued an alert, setting up a perimeter around the area. Witness descriptions poured in, leading deputies to search nearby roads, and surrounding neighborhoods. The manhunt stretched into the evening. Around 7 p.m., just hours after the shooting, Finley was spotted driving erratically several miles away. Units converged on the vehicle, executing a high-risk stop. Body cam footage from that night shows officers pulling him from the car at gunpoint, handcuffing him without a struggle. Nicholas Finley was taken into custody and transported to the Harris County Jail, where he was charged with capital murder. The sheriff's office confirmed he would remain behind bars without bond while awaiting trial. Back at the crime scene, investigators worked under floodlights that cut through the darkening Texas sky. Yellow markers lined the asphalt, marking each bullet casing, documenting every detail. Detectives photographed tire tracks, shoe prints, and blood trails, piecing together the final moments of Mersina's life. Hours later, long after the police tape went up and the last forensic team packed their gear, the community woke to heartbreaking news. A mother, who had moved to Houston to build a safer future, was gone. The following morning, silence hung over the park at Cumberland Apartments. The parking lot, now cleared of police tape, held only a faint outline where investigators had marked the ground. Neighbors who had witnessed the chaos struggled to return to their routines. Many left flowers, cards, and small candles near the spot where Mersina had fallen. By evening, dozens of residents, family members, and strangers gathered, holding candles against the warm Houston night air. The glow reflected off tear-streaked faces as prayers were whispered and hands held tight. A neighbor who had tried to help Mersina fought back tears as she told reporters she was running for her life. She just wanted to live for her son.
The neighbor tells me she did not know Marshana's drugs for very long, but she says she was beautiful and kind. She says the moment she heard gunshots, she feared for her friend's life.
Yesterday,
bullet holes are found on Shawnee Drury's front door.
it's right here. They're all of them are right here.
That son, only 8 years old, now faced a world without his mother. Mersina's sister set up a fundraiser to cover funeral costs and secure a future for the boy. Within hours, donations poured in from across Texas and beyond. Messages of love and support filled the page from people who had never met her but felt connected by the tragedy. Community leaders and advocates spoke out, urging stronger protections for those trapped in violent relationships. At the vigil, one pastor's voice broke as he said, "This is not just a statistic. This was a mother, a sister, a friend, and we failed her." As candles flickered and families hugged one another, the grief was heavy, but so was the call for change. If you made it this far, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Stories like Mersina's remind us why speaking out against domestic violence matters and why every voice can make a difference. Days after the shooting, Nicholas Finley appeared before a Harris County judge. Shackled, flanked by deputies, he faced a charge of capital murder, a charge reserved for the most serious crimes in Texas. Prosecutors describe how he not only killed Mersina, but also fled with her belongings in a calculated attempt to escape. The judge denied bond, meaning Finley would remain behind bars as the case moved forward. Legal experts explain that capital murder carries a possibility of life in prison without parole, or even the death penalty if convicted. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered as Sheriff Ed Gonzalez addressed the media. With solemn conviction, he spoke about an epidemic of domestic violence gripping Harris County, pointing out that 35% of murders in the region stem from intimate partner violence. His voice cut through the noise. This is a national crisis. Love should never end like this. Inside the community, frustration mixed with grief. People wanted to understand how a young mother seeking safety could end up hunted and killed in broad daylight. Advocates for victims' rights push for tougher intervention programs and greater protection for women trying to leave abusive relationships. Court proceedings will take months, possibly years, but the hope among family and friends is simple: that justice is served, and that Mersina's son grows up knowing her story brought change. 35% of murders in Harris County involve intimate partner violence. If you're watching and believe these voices must never be silenced, subscribe to AirAd True Crime Vault and help us shine a light on stories that demand justice. In the weeks that followed Mersina's death, conversations across Texas grew louder about the dangers so many face behind closed doors. Experts from the Houston Area Women's Center reminded the public of a harsh reality. When someone decides to leave an abusive partner, that moment becomes the most dangerous time in their life. Statistics show that when an abuser has access to a firearm, the risk of a woman being killed increases by as much as 500%. Advocates spoke at community forums and news conferences, holding up Mersina's story as a painful reminder that domestic violence does not always stay hidden. It can erupt in plain sight with deadly consequences. Shelters began seeing more calls from women seeking safety plans, asking how they could leave without being found. Organizations handed out pamphlets on protective orders, emergency housing, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, urging anyone feeling trapped or threatened to reach out before fear turns into tragedy. Across Houston, volunteers distributed resources at churches and schools, reminding everyone that help exists and that no one has to face abuse alone. The message was clear. Intervention can save lives, and silence allows danger to grow. Community leaders vowed to push for stronger laws, better enforcement, and more funding for services that protect victims and their children. Though heartbreak lingers, there's a growing determination that what happened to Mersina must never happen again. Long before headlines and crime scene tape, Mersina Struggs was a young mother with a warm smile and a laugh that carried through family gatherings. She loved dancing in the kitchen with her 8-year-old son, singing along to songs they both knew by heart. Friends say she never missed a birthday, never forgot to tell people she loved them. She dreamed of becoming a homeowner, of watching her boy graduate high school, of building a life filled with peace and safety. Those dreams were stolen, but her memory remained stronger than the tragedy that took her away. At her funeral, family members shared stories of her kindness, how she gave her last dollar to help someone in need, how she encouraged others even when she faced her own struggles. Her sister said through tears, "She was our rock, our light, and we will keep her light alive for her son." A montage of photographs shows Mersina laughing at a park, holding her son close on Christmas morning. Smiling in selfies she sent to loved ones. Each image tells a story of a life full of love and hope, cut short but never forgotten. As candles burn in her honor, this story is not just about loss. It's about change, about refusing to let her death be in vain. If you or someone you know is in danger, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. Share this video to honor Mersina Struggs and help prevent future tragedies. Subscribe to ARAD True Crime Vault, where real stories are told and voices are never left unheard. Justice tells their stories, so they're never forgotten